Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Jack Lavin, President and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here for the third event in the Chamber's Chicago at a Crossroads series. Thanks to you, we're 3 for 3 on sellout attendance at Crossroads. So thank you all for being here for these important discussions. And we are so excited for today's program on NASCAR coming to Chicago. In a few minutes, we'll break for lunch. We'll eat your salads now, but we'll get the main course in just a few minutes. Please feel free to eat. But after lunch, we'll have presenting sponsor present. But I want to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor for the Crossroads Series, Old National Bank, and Chamber Board member Mike Jamison. Let's give a big hand to Old National and Mike Jamison. I'd also like to thank today's host, the Chicago Athletic Association, for having us in their iconic space. And I might add, not a bad place to watch the NASCAR action on race day either. And speaking of the race, let's give a big round of applause to the NASCAR team, and in particular, Chicago Street Race President Julie Giese, not only for being here today, but for her generous sponsorship of the lunch. A big thank you to Chamber member Dennis Culleton for helping organize today's event. Dennis. I also want to thank NBC5 Sports Anchor Leila Rahimi for being here as well. As I'm sure you know, she was named 2022's Illinois Sportscaster of the Year, so let's give her a big round of applause. And we love her on Sports Sunday, too. Finally, I want to recognize the Chicagoland Chamber's chair of our board of directors, Kevin Cassidy, the Chief Growth Officer at Healthcare Service Corporation. Kevin Cassidy. And let's also give a round of applause for the tireless work of the Chamber staff in putting these events together. Chamber staff, raise your hand and let's recognize them. Chicago to Crossroads was designed to coalesce the business community around the most impactful issues facing Chicago and its business community. As you know, tourism and hospitality represent a massive part of our Chicago economy. For every $100 a hotel guest spends on lodging, they spend another $222 at their destination. This means that travel and tourism is at the epicenter of this vital hub and spoke model and a true economic engine for our entire region. As our economy continues to emerge from a once-in-a-century pandemic, we must find new ways to reignite our tourism and hospitality industry and support this critical sector with smart public policy frameworks that enable its success to bring back jobs and economic opportunity. That's why we're all here, to discuss the innovative thinking that has brought NASCAR to Chicago for perhaps the boldest bet in the league's 75-year history. And bringing their first ever street race here to our great city, NASCAR is clearly betting big on Chicago, and we're thrilled to hear about their big plans to support the city's vital tourism sector. As we think about the competition on race day, it's also important to remember the competition that it took to get here. NASCAR could have selected any city they wanted to have their first ever street race. There are plenty of towns who would have loved to roll out the red carpet for NASCAR, but they chose Chicago for a reason. They're betting big on this city because we are a place that's second to none. And of course, I want to thank our mayor for helping bring this here. Mayor Lightfoot was key in doing that. But I just want to say thank you, Julie, for choosing Chicago. And thank you, NBC, for the 3-day commercial on our beautiful global city at the best time of the year to show us off to the world and bring more tourists to Chicago. Chicago puts on a great show. And we have convened all the partners in this room, Julie, the chamber members, Choose Chicago, Illinois Office of Tourism, Hotel Association, Restaurant Association, MagMile, Chicago Federation of Labor, the Sports Commission, World Business Chicago, the Mayor's Office, Chicago Park District, BACP, and many others to show their support, as we always do, to make this a successful event over the next 3 years. We are all here to make you successful. Thank you again for choosing Chicago. At this point, it's my pleasure to bring to the stage the presenting sponsor of at the Chicago to Crossroads series, and my dear friend Mike Jamieson, Vice Chairman of Commercial Banking and Chicago Market President for Old National Bank. Mike is also a member of the board and the finance chair of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Chicago to Crossroads has become a premier forum across our city thanks to Mike's support. So we appreciate his leadership and everything that he and the Old National Bank team have done to make this program so successful. Please join me in welcoming my friend Mike Jamieson from Old National Bank. Mike?
Let me turn that right back on, Jack. I really would like to compliment you and the staff for putting together another great forum. Using an iconic space like this couldn't be better. So thank you for all that you're doing. Appreciate it. Welcome to everyone here today. It's going to be fun to listen to our speaker today. Old National has been proud to serve as the presenting sponsor for this dynamic executive forum since its inception, because we understand the value of coming together around the critical issues facing our city to help our community move forward. Chicago to Crossroads was designed to bring together prominent CEOs to discuss the big picture issues and how their organizations are maneuvering in the ever-changing business and labor world. The thing that makes Crossroads unlike any other speaker series is the unique focus on public policy and actionable follow-through that stems from these conversations. To date, we've had hard-hitting discussions ranging from electrical infrastructure to everyone's favorite topic of the day, crime and public safety. For those of you that were here last time, it was a terrific forum, and I think you see it being played out in the forums and the debates for the next mayor of Chicago. These actionable policy recommendations to grow the economy, improve the quality of life for every member of the Chicagoland community are what sets the Chamber apart. And we at Old National are proud to support these efforts. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate you taking part in these critical conversations. And now I'd like to turn this back over to Jack Lavin.
And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's main event. We are thrilled to have you here and look forward to hearing about your plans to bring jobs and economic opportunity back to Chicago and show our great global city to the world. Join me in welcoming to the stage NBC5 sports anchor Leila Rahimi and NASCAR Chicago street race president Julie Giese. Leila and Julie, welcome.
Hello, everyone, and thank you. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to Jack. Thank you to Mike and to Julie for having me. Just as a starter to get this out of the way, any NFL draft questions about the Bears will be taken later and after that portion of the program has proceeded. And for the record, all Super Bowl questions will also be held on to until after the show. I can help.
I can attest. She's already been given some tips at the table.
We are happy to be here, not just to speak about that, of course, as well, but this race and what it brings to Chicago. Julie is the former president of the Phoenix Raceway, and your resume begins much earlier than that, starting on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. So before we get to the dairy farm, what experiences do you take from your role in Phoenix to Chicago? And additionally, I would like to add that Julie oversaw the marketing efforts for NASCAR's 13 racetrack properties as the vice president of track marketing for NASCAR, as managing director of business operations for International Speedway Corporation, that is ISC's design and development, leading the coordination between their 13 racetracks, internal corporate departments, and the design and development team on the company's significant capital investment and redevelopment projects. So when you put that experience together, along with Phoenix, what made you decide to visualize a concept here in Chicago?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you all for being here. As Leila said, thanks to the Chamber and to Patrick and the CAA team for hosting us. I think for me, I spent 14 years at Daytona International Speedway, and during that time, we had the opportunity to renovate Daytona as part of it. It was a $400 million renovation, and it was literally something that we had never done before. And it was a blank sheet of paper that I worked on the marketing team, but was suddenly rebuilding this icon for the Speedway. And one of the things that I learned in that is just how everything really comes together. So I had the opportunity when we were finishing up Daytona, we were just getting ready to do a project at Phoenix Raceway, a similar one. And as part of that, they asked me to join the construction team. So I turned in my marketing hat and put on my steel-toe boots and my vest and hard hat and worked on the construction project at Phoenix Raceway. And once we finished that, I had the opportunity to lead the team there for 4 years. And for me, this was, it wasn't coming to the Chicago, running a street race wasn't like in my roadmap. And like 20 years ago, I was thinking about this. But for me, I think the preparation and going through what we did at Daytona and taking that and then what I was able to be part of in Phoenix, really, this is that culmination. We're creating a brand new event. This is the first time NASCAR's run a street race. This is our 75th year. And to be able to do that here in the city of Chicago is a tremendous opportunity. You mentioned the dairy farm, so it comes a little bit full circle for me because I get to come back to the Midwest.
We won't talk about the NFL fandom, though, right? That will also be held until the end of this program.
Thank you.
As far as what you were able to do in Phoenix and that experience that you had, when it came to coming up with this concept and working with NASCAR, what can you tell us about how it came together?
So this concept started years ago, and I see Cara in the room from the Sports Commission, and Choose Chicago have been great partners with us working on this. And during the pandemic, our drivers, when we weren't able to race, we created a virtual racing series, and it was called the iRacing Pro Invitational. And we had the opportunity during that time to work with the team at the Sports Commission to scan the streets and create a virtual Chicago street race. It was something that we have always wanted to do, a street race, again, not having done it before. And so we were able to do that. Our drivers raced their very first Chicago street race in 2021 virtually. And that was a great proof of concept for us. It showed us what was possible, what it could look like. And then as our team and our leadership we're really focused on like expanding our schedule, taking our sport to new audiences. And last year we ran a race in the LA Memorial Coliseum. We actually just did that a couple days ago, called the Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum. We actually pave a racetrack on top of the football field at the Coliseum and run an exhibition race. And that taught us that we can build temporary courses. And if you probably look at a picture of the Coliseum today, I'm not sure there's any asphalt left on the track or on the football. We have to return it back quickly to the football field. So that helped us, okay, we can set up things in this temporary manner and bring this sport to a whole new audience, which is really what's the primary goal of this, is introduce NASCAR to a whole new audience.
That's it. The special nature of the street course is something that we'll get into a little bit later, but a lot of us saw that announcement that came out about the virtual race and what that would mean for Chicago and how that came into this experience. What did you learn from that? And what was it like working with the city in that role prior to announcing this event?
I think the biggest thing we learned is that it is possible, and the views. I think we all that's a virtual view, but I mean the city of Chicago, and whether it's the skyline, the lake, Grand Park, Buckingham Fountain, Museum Campus, that whole area there is absolutely spectacular. And that came through on a video game. And so to be able to do that live and in person we're going to be broadcast on NBC, as Jack said. It'll be a 2-day commercial on the city of Chicago, thanks to our partners on NBC. And so working together with the Sports Commission and Choose and the mayor's office to bring this to life, I think that was that tipping point where we're like, okay, how do we bring this, make this a reality? And the team worked over the next year to get it done and brought us to where we are here today.
And I think for a lot of people who maybe missed the introductory press conference over the summer, what are some high points that you can tell them and the people here in attendance that you would like to reiterate from that time? And maybe if you want to revise anything since that discussion that's been announced.
I think first and foremost, NASCAR is here in the community year round, and that's really important to us. We've set up an office We have a team of individuals dedicated on this event, and we want to be a member of the community. We are a member of the community. It's been fun seeing a lot of familiar faces already for me in this room, and look forward to the opportunity to meet and work with all of you. I think that's incredibly important. We are going to be here and want to be here 365 days a year and be part of this community. We're not going to come in, run a race, and then leave. And I think that's first and foremost. Obviously around the announcement and the fact that we do have the ability to showcase Grant Park and the city. I think since then we've worked with a partner, CSL, on an economic impact study where we're anticipating at least $113 million of economic impact directly to the city of Chicago. And honestly, I hope we surpass that. I mean, that's a baseline, right? So, and then the biggest question coming out of the announcement, and once we put our premium tickets on sale, was, well, who's going to be the concerts? So we've been able to since announce the concerts, which we did that a couple of weeks ago with. We have the Black Crowes, the Chainsmokers on Saturday, Miranda Lambert and Charlie Crockett on Sunday. So lots going on.
And we'll get into a little bit of that, but I did want to ask you, when it comes to setting up an office here, what's the feedback and the interaction been like from people who live here, and what have you learned from them?
It's been tremendous, and I think a lot of you in this room have been incredibly helpful for me. One, I moved here in December, and our team has hit the ground running, trying to make as many connections as possible, and that's been very helpful. That's the education process for me. We want to make sure that we put our best foot forward, but there's a lot of history and a lot of institutional knowledge in this room that I have enjoyed getting to know and learn from. And so being here in the market and being able to just have those conversations, or Michael and I were talking this morning about some questions specific to, actually, we were in this room with some of our hotel partners, and what does that look like? And to be able to just head over, go to a meeting, have the face-to-face conversation has been incredibly important. And we want to make sure that this works for everybody and that everybody, we have a full understanding of what that means and that we can put our best foot forward.
Before we get to the actual race particulars, I know, Jack, you touched on it a little bit. There's also a race simulation video, as we understand. Should we show everybody?
You want to show that now, or you want to show? All right. So what we did, as we mentioned, the video, the game that will be our actual race car drivers that will host that are racing on this track. So you get a little bit of a preview of what this is going to look like.
Always a little easier to show than just talk.
It really is. And I would say we do have a simulator over there. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to test it out, but if you would like to try your hand at the street race, I highly encourage to stop over there before you leave. I will warn you, it's a lot harder than it looks.
And I've seen Bubba Wallace himself on a NASCAR Street Simulator to try to get a little more intel before the race on July 1st and 2nd. So here's what we do know. This is a race that will make history for NASCAR as the first ever street race. It is staged downtown, as we know, July 1st and 2nd here in town. It is a 2.2-mile course. Did I see a right turn in there? We got right turns.
Right and left turn.
12 turns. And on the straightaways, the drivers can reach speeds of up to over 100 miles an hour. There are 55 laps, 121 miles, and 4 concerts over the 2-day race event. For people who might not know, when we think of a NASCAR race in Chicago, many always thought of the race in Joliet that concluded in 2019. This clearly looks different. But if you had to explain some of the key differences other than what we just saw, what do you say?
I think the right-hand turn is a big one. I think this is obviously a road course or a street race, so left and right-hand turns. With Joliet, it was an oval and very different setup from a speed perspective as well. But a lot of that same core energy that you get from a NASCAR race, if you went to Joliet or if you've gone to Michigan or Daytona or Phoenix, really will translate to this event weekend. And I think one thing about our sport that I enjoy very much is the access that it provides all of our attendees. Our fans have the ability to interact with our drivers on those race weekends. They see the cars. They're able to get really up close prior to race time to see the stars and the cars of the event. And we definitely want to carry that through. And then the fan experience for us this is an opportunity for us to reinvent a little bit on what that looks like. As you mentioned, this is a festival, and we want this to be more than just a race. And I think as somebody who has visited Chicago prior to moving here, I mean, you came here in the summer and there was a million different festivals. There was just always so many different things to do. That's what we really want to weave into the experience for the race weekend. It's a racing and music festival. We're working with our partners at Four Leaf Productions and Charlie Jones on helping us bring that to life, a group that knows that space incredibly well. And, this is something our industry has worked really hard on, continuing to evolve that experience. We want to invite and get new fans out there, but we also realize somebody may not sit in a seat for 2 hours and watch the race. So how do we create these moments and experiences that will resonate with a wide variety of people? You can walk around, you can experience it around the fountain table or down in the concerts in Lower Hutchinson Field. You can then walk over based on where your pass is, your hospitality experience, and there's just so many different things that you'll be able to do. And then we're going to create a free area just on the north side of the park, of the footprint. So all of our community, like if you want to come out and still be part of the event, there'll be some things set up throughout that Butler Field experience as well.
And for those of you, it was placed in your seat who might have it. This is the fast card that they handed out. You can see the course layout, and you also see some of the facts that I just mentioned. But one of the things that stood out to me was not just I want to call it an hourglass. Do you guys have a name yet for the course as far as how you're describing it?
No, we don't. I keep hearing figure 8, but they're not crossing, so I always feel like I have to point that out.
So we'll call it a faux figure 8 for now. But when you look at it, it does look like it's a different fan experience than what we're also used to seeing. So there's grandstands, there are different field reserve spaces. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that lends itself to, there's a lot of different ways that you can experience this event weekend. If you want, one of the things that's the beauty of road courses or street races is you have, a lot of our fans will want to walk around and take in the experience from different vantage points, to see the race from different points. So we have a general admission pass that allows that to happen. You can walk around and see those different areas. Everyone coming through the ticket gates will have access to the Buckingham Fountain area. And then we've created these different experiences. If you want a reserved seat, that we have some reserved seating. Obviously, based on the park, we're not setting up tens and thousands of grandstands. That's not the experience we want. There'll be some reserved seating, but then we also have a lot of different hospitality options. I think for those of you that haven't been to a race, but maybe have gone to a golf tournament and you see those hospitality chalets around the greens or tee boxes, it's that we'll have some of those experiences as well. And to me, I think the hallmark and that icon for the event will really be centered on the start-finish line, which is on Columbus at Buckingham Fountain is our paddock club. It is a significant structure that's going to have amazing views. It's going to be built above a tree line. line. It's 2 stories tall, overlooking pit road, and you'll be able to see a lot of the different angles of the course from that location.
And before we get into access, which is a key point in this discussion, where do you see the festival aspect being held, the concerts, and how that folds into Grant Park?
So the concert footprint, the main stage will follow a similar footprint as Lala's main stage down in Lower Hutchinson Field. That's where that concert experience will take place, but we're working on having activations throughout that space, but also around Buckingham Fountain and the Fountain Table.
People want to know about access. The reports say that NASCAR has 3 weeks of access prior to the race at Grant Park and access up to 9 days after the event. When you add it up, it's practically a month. What can we expect? If I'm somebody walking and I want to make a left turn into Grant Park, if I'm walking south, how is that going to look?
Yeah, it's a great question, and specifically, especially if you look at the course map and see where those structures are, a lot of that access that will be in the park is specific to those areas because of the builds that we have to do. Those are along the streets. Most of them, if not all of them, really aren't in a lot of that center green space area. So we're working really hard with the team to just make sure that we're able to leave that green space open as long as possible leading into the event weekend, especially access to the fountain. We understand the importance of that. So as people that are coming in want to stop by, get their photo with the fountain. So right now we're anticipating being able to leave that open up until a couple days before race weekend. And then obviously we're July 1st and 2nd with July 4th right around the corner, making sure that we have that back open for that holiday, knowing that, again, people want to be able to see the fountain while they're here.
And then this is also a street race. As we mentioned, you can see on that fast card, it takes us through some of Chicago's really most busy thoroughfares. When you consider DuSable Lakeshore Drive, Columbus Drive, Congress Plaza Drive. So what can you tell us about how the race will affect the streets? Because there's time allotted before and after there as well.
There is. I will say we're not shutting down the streets for a month. That is not happening. So there is, and essentially a lot of those, the streets will remain open up until the race week for the most part. There's some staggered schedules that will have to take place just based again on some of those structure builds. But we understand the importance of DuSable Lakeshore as well as Michigan and making sure that those stay open as long as possible and then open the first opportunity following the race on Monday morning. So we've been working right now with a lot of different departments to finalize what that timeline looks like, but we're anticipating a majority of those streets will be able to remain open through, again, a couple days before race weekend, 28th, 29th at this point in time.
And that's something, too, where we want to visualize what we might see. I've read about concrete barriers being put in place. Clearly, those are to help define the track for the racers. What can you tell us about what we might see there, just if we're encountering something driving?
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that I get a lot is just like how does it get set up and what does it look like? So we will be installing basically concrete barriers that have an 8-foot fence above them that will become that perimeter for the racetrack itself. Those get placed in the curb lanes along the course area in a staggered schedule again, and that's what we're working on right now is what that cadence looks like so that we can leave those main thoroughfares open without having those barriers in place as quickly or as long as possible. And then same thing, we'll run the race and then the same cadence to remove everything as quickly as possible. We want this to be a positive for everybody. We don't want to be, we want to remove everything as quickly as possible, get it in place as quickly as possible, and knowing that this is summertime in Chicago and people want to enjoy the park, that there are a lot of people that are visiting, and we want to make sure that it's a positive experience for everybody.
And we appreciate the answers because these are questions we've all been asked since the race has started. Along with, yes, what are the Bears going to do with the first overall pick? I have heard that one a time or two. When it comes to museum access, because that is part of this course, you see them along the way, and I'm sure that's by design. How is that going to affect museum access, Shedd Aquarium access for those of us who want to attend those places?
Well, we have, and some of our partners are here from the museum campus as well as the Art Institute. We've been working really closely with them, but I would say also all the businesses along Michigan and even further out with understanding what that what the concerns are, what the most important things are. Again, traffic and like the path of travel. The team was great and took me out and walked me through the process. Like how are people accessing these areas and these areas, so that it gives us the information that we need as we're building the course and building our timelines to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. We know about it, and that's something that we're continuing to work on. So museum campus, we're working hard to make sure people can get there. That's incredibly important. Same with the Art Institute, same with all the different buildings that are along Michigan Avenue. That's important to us. We want this to be a positive for them as much as it is for just the overall city and NASCAR.
And when you're talking about 100 miles an hour, I know a lot of us think we drive that fast occasionally on these streets, but that is a lot of wear and tear. So how do you foresee that taking place as far as what happens after the race and what that might do? And I do consider things inside museums and aquariums as being priceless, and if they are affected by the vibrations of those very fast cars.
I would say just we, like, specific to the streets and to the park as well, like we're going to leave that in as good a condition, if not better, than when we got there. That's incredibly important to us. This is our home now too, and we want to make sure that we take care of all that. So that is something that we're working really hard on. And again, just with everything else, understanding the concerns and working closely with the different stakeholders to make sure that everybody has a good understanding, and me too, honestly, just so we know what to expect, has been helpful. And I think we feel good about where we are right now. I enjoy the conversations and the dialogue so that we can be as proactive as possible as we plan forward, because there's like 140 days left, I believe, until the race, not that I'm counting. So we'll continue those conversations over the next 140 days.
When you come up with the $113.8 million number for economic impact, how are you tabulating that?
A lot of that is just based on, so we worked with an economics firm, CSL, who does a lot of these studies for a lot of different sporting events across the world. And basically what they did was take some inputs on attendees and where they're coming from, and then what does that look like? So we're anticipating about 65% of our attendees will be coming from out of town, and where the preliminary numbers are over 24,000 room nights will be booked, and as part of that, 4,000 staff, like industry people, will be traveling in to run this event, which is part of that as well. So all of that kind of comes together. They have a magic formula that gives us that number. And then I'd say that in addition to that, then you have, there's some breakouts that we were able to do, $3 million in tax revenue directly to the city of Chicago. And we were talking this morning just about the impacts just from a workforce perspective. It definitely lends itself to that as well as we move forward.
And the number that I last saw said an anticipated 100,000 fans will be partaking in this race. Is that a number that we can still expect?
Yes, the 100,000 will be across both days, so we're anticipating about 50,000 per day, and it is being sold as a 2-day package, so we want everybody to be able to experience the entire weekend of events.
Those are all the questions I have. I know we have some time for Q&A, right, Jack? Keep me honest on this. We produce on the fly here. So I know we have some questions that were mentioned to me. The hardest part is always getting somebody to ask them. Okay, so we have one person. Do I need to walk my mic over, or do you get a microphone? Let's see what happens.
We've been working with CDOT on studying all of that. The beauty of running a street race is that we're running on the streets that we have. I think there's a few areas that very typical maintenance that you would see is what we're working on, but you won't see all of them being repaved and redone or reworked. None of that. We're using the footprint that we have. We're anticipating at least 65% of them will be coming from out of town. And I would say just based on early numbers, that's probably a very conservative estimate at this point in time. I think we're looking at some of our other event weekends as well. We're hopefully it's a lot higher than that, but we figure at least 65% will be coming in. You know, Each track is very unique. I think if I look back at my experience in Phoenix, about 50% were coming from out of state, and 50% were in state, and that was the NASCAR Championship weekend. So, and I think Daytona is probably right around there, Daytona 500 being our biggest event of the year coming up. I'd say most of the time our races on a regular basis are pulling the core from a few hundred miles away. Yes, so we've been working on what that footprint looks like. You will see a lot of the same perimeter fencing that you would see at Lala as part of that, and security and just safety in general from our industry. With the cars, we understand, with the racetrack and the barriers and the fencing is something that we've got a team that's been working with us on the racetrack part of it, and then working really closely with the local law enforcement and everything else to build out that plan. But it'll be very similar to what you would see from a Lala perspective.
Kevin Cross, NBC5.
It is, and that is a fantastic question. So our partners with NBC were here for a site visit late last year, and it was a cooler, rainy day, and we walked the park, and they were giddy. I'm not going to lie. Like walking around and seeing, there was a point in time, and Charlie was with us, there was a point in time they got to the fountain and they turned around and they saw the skyline and they were like, this is it. So I think they are looking at it as the lens of showcasing the entire footprint in the city versus just the product on track. So it lends itself to obviously have these really beautiful wide shots of the park, the lake, the skyline, all of that. So they will be back here in a couple weeks to continue to work through what their camera angles are going to look like, their placement looks like, but I anticipate they'll have a pretty large footprint around that fountain table looking up at the skyline.
Other questions? I'm surprised. I thought there would be more questions. I'll relay one that I heard before the event. We've talked a lot about streets, parks. There's also tons of people who live downtown. So how do you see that being an issue as far as access for them? If you're living in a residential condo apartment building, a 3-flat, if you're lucky, around here somewhere.
Yeah, so that is important to us. We've been working through what that looks like. For us, it's making sure that we minimize the disruption to them as much as possible. I've had conversations with a number of different buildings already that are out just on the exterior of the footprint with questions. And they've been really good, positive conversations to understand what's most important, what are their questions, and then being able to come back to them with a lot of detail and answers. April, May, and June, we're committed to doing a lot of different community meetings, education meetings, whether it's individual organizations or larger events, just again, helping everyone understand what to expect. And then we'll be setting up a microsite that has a lot of just the information on it, again, thinking about routes and how you get to different places, how to plan for this, and this. I mean, there's a lot of, we know that we're not the only thing happening July 4th weekend in Chicago as well. There's a volleyball tournament and a lot of other events. So we're making sure that we're working in conjunction with all of those partners to make it a very seamless experience for everyone that's traveling in, as well as the residents. Because
if you're just trying to get home over July 4th weekend, that's what I picture is how are they going to have that access? Or if somebody has to work.
Yeah, and we're working through all of those. We've been keeping just a really great frequently asked questions, as well as starting to create a lot of maps just to help people understand how to navigate around and what that access looks like. And I would say the city and the team that we're working with, they're so they know how to put on big events, and it's been incredibly helpful for us as we've gone through this. We've had really great conversations with the marathon. A lot of people have mentioned the marathon. Obviously, I know there's been a lot of mentions today about Lala as well. Just learning best practices from all of them has been important and really helpful.
I would like to take this time to remind you can all see the marathon at NBC Chicago. Shameless plug. Shout out to Kevin and the NBC5 table. Thank you. Jack, did you have a question?
So we are, as I mentioned, we are working on the footprint around the track itself on any minor maintenance that may be needed. But it will be specific to the footprint. I was at a meeting the other day and they're like, do you think you could come down to this side and do something over here? So it's the footprint. But I'll tell you, working with whether it's the mayor's office, Choose Chicago, Sports Commission, I mean, all the different city departments. I said it earlier, and it's a team that, I mean, they put on big events a lot. And being able to plug into that and to leverage their institutional knowledge, their experience, you know, they're learning NASCAR. We're learning like their ins and outs. And it's been a really positive conversation. We've been able to get a few people to different races from a training perspective. You know, I think the biggest thing for us is just making sure we're speaking the same language. Just how when we refer to barriers, what does that mean? But when they refer to specific fencing, what does that mean? It's just, and it's been really a good open dialogue. I appreciate that, Jack. The promoter in me is like, we have a sales team over here. But I would say too, first and foremost, and a lot of you have done this for me already, if you're talking with somebody and they have questions, I would welcome the conversation. And I am, and our team is, a lot of them are over here at the table here, that we would love to have those conversations and be able to understand if there are questions, concerns, what they are, and then help us, give us the opportunity to work through it. I think that is something that I really want to make sure that we do. I don't want anybody feeling like they don't have any understanding, or they're hearing something that's different than what was said the other day. Is this real? Is this not? Please, I would welcome that conversation, and our entire team would. And then I think this is a tremendous opportunity. We're excited to be here. We want to be in Chicago, and this wasn't something that we put out for bid. This was something that we said, we want to be in Chicago, and we're proud of that. I'm proud to live here, and we're proud that we have an office here. So I would just, again, if there's an opportunity for a conversation that you think somebody would benefit from, I would love to have it. That's a great question, and it's something that I was sharing this weekend with some of my colleagues at the LA Memorial Coliseum. I think understanding like that we are putting up a footprint around the streets. A lot of people mention, like, is this the Fast and the Furious? Like, are they just, you know? And it, to me though, those questions, I'm like, this is why we're here, is to educate and open doors and show people what NASCAR is about. So it is, you know, putting up those barriers and the fencing and having a perimeter fence from a safety perspective is probably the biggest misconception, that we're closing the streets for a month, which we're not. That's probably the other one.
I think that might wrap it up. Jack, thanks again. Mike, thank you. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Jack.
Thank you. Thank you again, Julie and Leila. We're so excited. If you can't get excited about race day after this, I don't know what we can. And I will say one of the partners in the audience may be a Special Olympics Chicago. They're a great partner, and there may be some ambassadors that can work with you and sell. And by the way, the Polar Plunge is coming up March 5th. They are a chamber member too. But as we want to thank you again for being here as we continue on the road to recovery after the pandemic, creating bold and innovative strategies to bring travel and tourism back to Chicago will be critical to the success of our economy. So I'd like to thank you again for being here. Let's give them another round of applause. We'll be part of the shared victory, and we won't ask any draft questions, but Leila's available to answer
I can talk
those.
later. I'm on Wednesdays. I'm on Channel 5. I'm around.
Thank you again to Chicago Athletic Club for hosting us this afternoon. A big thanks to Old National Bank for their continued support. And thanks to all of you for joining the Chamber in these critical conversations. Please join us for our next Chicago at a Crossroads event in the series on February 27th, Building Next Generation Care, with the CEOs of Advocate Health, Jim Skogsberg and Eugene Woods. So thank you all again for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again, Julie and Leila.